Welcome to UC Today with me, David Dungay. Today I am talking to William Rubio from CallTower. Welcome to the show, William. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, David. Thank you very much for having us on. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you for asking. So, William, today we're going to be talking about Microsoft Teams, GCC High, and in particular the defence industry and how these things are coming together. But before we get into that conversation, can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and CallTower?
Sure, no, I'd love to. So my name is William Rubio. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at CallTower. Been on CallTower approximately about 10 years, so definitely been there for a while already. And CallTower itself, we've been around since 2002, so we actually just had our 20-year anniversary. And we've basically evolved over the past few years into really a global cloud-based enterprise class UC organization. We do unified communications, contact center, and collaboration solutions for growing organizations globally. We integrate some industry-leading solutions such as Microsoft Teams, Direct Routing, Operator Connect, Office 365, GCC High, which we're going to talk about here today, Cisco WebEx, Cisco dedicated instance as well. We're also a partner with Cisco for their what they call their Certified Cisco PSTN Provider Program. We have our own contact center solution. We also do power or partner with Five9 to provide another type of CCaaS solution overall. So for us, it's all about communication or contact center as a service and unified communications as a service, and everything really that kind of wraps around that.
Great. So we're going to talk about some of those things you just mentioned in a moment. But before we do, I want to highlight some of the challenges around selling into sectors, particularly around these government agencies that you sell to. What are those challenges right now? Where are people struggling to sell to this part of the market?
Well, there's a couple different things, and it's kind of it continues to evolve. Is probably the easiest way of saying it. So, Microsoft has really done a phenomenal job when they've deployed their Microsoft Teams and their Azure cloud. And when they did that, they basically divided, if you want to call it, their Azure cloud into two different parts. They did an Azure commercial, and then they did an Azure government. On the Azure commercial, that's where you get the commercial Office 365, which most organizations kind of fit into that tenant within that Azure government cloud overall, as well as GCC, which stands for Government Commercial Cloud. So that's usually when you're going to your local or your state government organizations and you're checking like property taxes and different things like that. On the flip side, what Microsoft did, and they won this business from the U.S. government years ago, is they have worked exclusively with the Department of Defense. So there's the Azure government side of 365, which the Department of Defense is in. Now, what the Department of Defense has done within that Azure government cloud is they've reached out to their Department of Defense contractors, and they said, if you want to work with the Department of Defense and you want us to be one of your customers, then you have to basically be within this, what they call GCC High, which is Government Commercial Cloud High. So it's no longer in the commercial cloud, it is now in the Azure government. And that's the way that you could actually communicate back and forth with the Department of Defense. Now, your entire organization, in a lot of cases, does not need to be within that tenant in your Azure government. It could only be a certain department or group within your organization, or it can be your entire organization. But it's not something that you could just jump into. You have to go through the vetting process to actually get audited and go in there. But again, if you want to be a contractor for the Department of Defense, you have to actually be in there and do it. So you have a challenge first for the Department of Defense contractors that they are slowly but surely migrating into this type of environment to communicate with the DoD. And then on top of that, you also have the DoD departments themselves that are looking for these services, and they're starting to use Microsoft Teams, and they really want to start enabling a lot of the voice portion of Teams to actually do conferencing and do PSTN calling as well, because they're saying, I'm using Microsoft Teams for everything else, why not just enable the voice part of it as well? So there's a challenge both from them from a technology and from a checking a box standpoint to making sure that they're compliant, and then also who it is that they could service. And it's really trying to find that happy medium between organizations like ourselves and those departments and organizations that need these services.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a familiar story. You know, selling to any government agency all over the world, there's a few hoops to jump through before that's possible, which is fairly standard, I think. So let's talk about the product itself. You mentioned, you know, the differences between the commercial and the private cloud. Tell me, how do you take a product like Microsoft Teams though and make it really suitable for a market like defense?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. You know what Microsoft Teams has actually done, and one thing I forgot to mention too earlier, David, is you got to make sure that with the government you have the right contracting vehicles to make sure that you could sell into the government. So you want to have like a GSA schedule, which we actually have through one of our partnerships with TCI, which is great. So you also want to make sure that you have that contracting vehicle to work with them. But what Microsoft did with Microsoft Teams is that it is not your traditional VoIP system when you're actually making calls overall, whether it's a Teams to Teams call or a Teams to a PC client. What it does is it's actually encrypting the communication between the client and the Teams server in Office 365. So this encrypted communication is over your standard data network, right? Your connection that you have from internet over to Microsoft. And what it does is the communication between the Teams client and the server is satisfying the security needs that are put in place with some of the different compliance regulations like NITS 180, CMMC, which is kind of the new one that's just been enabled overall. And lucky for us and working with Microsoft, what we've been able to do is really kind of take CallTower to the next level by making sure that we are actually complying with these different types of requirements to enable the PSTN calling within that Azure government cloud for the GCC High, not just the contractors, the Department of Defense contractors, but actually even the Department of Defense agencies themselves that are looking to enable voice within Microsoft Teams. So it's a give and take about making sure that, number one, do you have the right security measures in place to go ahead and be compliant on the different compliance regulations that are currently out there that the U.S. government requires to work with the DoD.
So, William, I want to pick up on that voice and that PSTN service that we've seen all that growth in across Microsoft Teams. What is the significance of being able to deliver Microsoft Direct routing on GCC High, and why is it approved for that? Such a big success factor for you and your partners.
It's we're really in a unique position overall right now. We've been, and a lot of people don't know this, but Microsoft has been doing voice for probably about over 10 years. They actually started doing voice back in the days with what they used to call OCS, and then it converted over to Link 2010, Link 2013. It wasn't the best experience. We all kind of know that, but they did provide it, and then obviously it changed to Skype for Business, and now we're here working with Microsoft Teams. And CallTower has really been doing that since 2008 with Microsoft, and what it's done is it's really kind of helped us understand what the ecosystem is within Microsoft, how they kind of look at voice as another application. And when GCC High was starting to be developed right around the end of I would say middle of 2019 and so forth, we started talking back and forth with Microsoft about, well, they need a voice provider. They want to be compliant, so they don't want to put their voice within the GCC High environment so that they're continuing to meet all their needs. And they were looking for a trusted partner. And they realized with the experience that CallTower has had, that it was really kind of a good match made in heaven to really do it. Now, we had to go through some stringent testing with them for a few months to make sure that we got it right, and we did. And then once we got it right, we were able to go to market together and really work with customers. And a lot of these customers, whether they're organizations in the government or some of these Department of Defense contractors themselves, they're used to being on some type of premise-based solution overall. They've already made the commitment to move into the cloud, so they're using Microsoft Teams from a collaboration standpoint, again, communicating back and forth with the DoD. And then the next question comes up, which is, well, why not just enable the voice? Why not just do the PSTN? Why not just make that my PBX replacement, because that's what my employees are basically communicating with back and forth. And that's when the question comes of who's out there. And there's a couple different ways you could do it. You could do it with somebody like us that's certified. You can also go ahead and look at doing it yourself by actually putting SBCs in each one of your locations, but that draws a whole other, different ball of wax, right? When you're talking about having spare SBCs, you got to port numbers. Do you have different SIP providers to actually make sure you have redundancy, the failovers, who's doing your emergency calling, all those different heavy lifting things that you have to do, whether it's a larger office or a small office, that falls on the customer. With us, all that heavy lifting is already done by us. So we have the redundant SBCs, we do the porting for you. We're pretty much doing everything from soups to nuts, and to make sure that you can continue to grow. And it really grows from, first we want you to do the conferencing with the dial-in and the callback features. Then now I want you to do the PBX replacement. And then I also want you to look at doing the contact center. So it kind of evolves from one step to another with those.
So, William, you mentioned security encryption already. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that and how CallTower are tackling those really important factors for the defense industry.
Hey, that there's a really big conversation or discussions that are being had at the government level when you really start to talk about how do you actually control the PSTN and the conduit that you're actually using for phone calls? Because what winds up happening when you try to kind of throw VoIP into everything, and a lot of organizations really just throw data and they throw voice into as part of the data, is there's really only a certain way that you could, or really no official way to really control that voice path. You could separate the VLANs, and that's one of the things that we're able to do to make sure that you keep the voice separate than your data. And the biggest reason for that is you want to make sure that your data is not being stored somewhere else. And that's actually the beauty of working with our solution with Microsoft Teams and GCC High, is that the security measurements are satisfied because the data is completely separate than the voice part. I mean, all you're doing is you're accessing CallTower through the SBCs to make and receive your phone calls. And that's really what you want. The rest of it, everything from your network security to your policies, to your passwords, to your MFA, all that stays within your team server within Office 365. So when you start talking about the compliance piece, we're able to check those boxes for the customer, because the only thing that's really outside of that team server is the PSTN, which if you go and you look at within the CMMC and within NITS 180 and so forth, it's compliant, because I can't control, let's just say, David, you're over in the UK, I'm over in Florida and in the States. When I call you, I can control my end if I initiate the call from my team's client, but I can't control where I'm calling you. So if I'm calling your mobile device, or if I'm calling your house phone or your office phone, I can't control where it's going over because I can only really control my end. So that's really always kind of been a strain on the different compliance regulations and what's VoIP, what's not, how do you control the PSTN, because it's really just a conduit for phone calls, and in a lot of cases those items don't fall under what they kind of call the CUI, which is that controlled unclassified information. So I mean, as you can tell, it's pretty exciting stuff. There's thousands and thousands of pages of kind of the back and forth going on this to make sure. But the good thing is that we've been doing it for a while with Microsoft, and we have been compliant. And the customers, all the way from government agencies that we do work with and Department of Defense contractors, are being able to make sure that they're compliant and communicating back and forth the way that they want to. So it does work, and it works the right way.
Well, thanks for that, William. I mean, before we go, I'd really like to get some top tips for those partners, wanting to sell Microsoft services into the defense sector. To all those viewers, what are your top tips for them, William?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost important thing is you have to make sure that you have what they call the right contracting vehicle when you are going to be working with some type of .gov organization, whether it's on the local, the state, or even the federal level. They're going to ask you about how it is that we're able to go ahead and work together through the purchasing process. So CallTower is fortunate to work with our partners over at TCI, and we're able to go ahead and provide that solution to our customers. So we use them with their GSA schedule to actually communicate. So that is with the .gov type of agencies overall. The Department of Defense contractors, it is a little bit easier because they are just business organizations, and you can just use your normal contracting vehicle for that. But in both cases, you want to make sure that you're talking to the right individuals in those organizations. A lot of times it's the security people that you have to educate correctly on what do you have to be compliant on, what you don't. And the great thing is that when you are working within Microsoft Teams, and these organizations already have it, 90% of the compliance regulations are already done. So they feel a lot better about working with an organization that's using Teams and leveraging it than you coming in trying to do a full rip and replace. So that's always going to be one of the challenges. But do your homework. It's a big sector that's out there. It's needed, right? So it's never going to go away overall, and it just continues to grow overall. And we're here to answer any questions that our partners or potential customers might have.
Fantastic. Well, William, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to our audience for watching. My name's been David Dungay. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a like and a share on social media. That's it from me. See you next time.